Are the fires in California God's judgment? Is DEI the cause? What do we think of the fires in California on this slice of fresh bread? Welcome to Fresh Bread, a podcast ministry of Grace Bible Church, Gainesville, with Pastor Brandon and Pastor Keith. Well, thanks for clicking on Fresh Bread, where we're bringing the truth of God's Word to a starving world. Fresh Bread Podcast 93. And today we're going to take a look at what's going on in California. There's a lot of fires going on there. And both Pastor Brandon, I'm Pastor Keith, both Pastor Brandon and myself lived in California for an extended period of time as we were going to the Master's Seminary. So we're familiar with a lot of this area that's been burning, and we just thought we would take some time from theology, from doctrine, and just kind of look at what's going on there with these fires. We have 24 people who are dead or missing, and we're just trying to understand when we look at the world today and how there's a certain order that God has structured things. And if we go by how He has ordered things, our life is not, of course, not going to be perfect because we live in a fallen world, but things will be better. They will go, I think, more as planned. And we're going to kind of dig into all the things that are happening there. We're going to look at DEI, this mentality that's sort of sweeping the world, really, but mostly the United States, and where everything has to be equal. There has to be an equal number of women, an equal number of homosexuals, equal number of transgenders, an equal number of black men. I mean, you can go on, and we're going to look at that. Is that biblical? Is it biblical for everyone to be equal? Pastor Brandon, let's dig in. What is going on in California? What's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, both of us have had history in Southern California. As a matter of fact, the summer before I left, living out there for seminary, there was a big fire there, and it's called the Sand Fire that was really close to our house. We were in a neighborhood and protected for the most part in a more manicured neighborhood, but the fire, I have a couple of pictures where I'm in the backyard and you can see the glow of the fire and you can see the ash falling like snow, and it was pretty interesting that whole fire situation there, and it burned. It burned and threatened a bunch of houses, but it was not as dense in population as where this particular fire is at. The fire that's going on, I think there's obviously multiple fires, but the one that's probably gotten the most news is the one that's Pacific Palisades, where a lot of people's houses, including celebrity houses, have been burned. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack. I mean, you brought up the DEI stuff. I think we need to also talk about God's wrath, and is this God's wrath on California, on the United States? And we need to think through that and have a biblical answer. So I hope that maybe we can unpack that as well.
Yeah, explain what is DEI.
It's basically the idea of diversity, in terms of the idea is that the society needs to force diversity. And
so it's diversity, equity, inclusion. Is
yes.
That what it stands for? Okay.
Yes. And so it's interesting because I think a lot of people would say, because I think you hear what they say about DEI, and a lot of people would say, well, isn't that the Constitution? All men are created equal, mm-hmm. right? And they would argue that's what the framers of the Constitution meant. The Declaration of Independence and the concept of all men are created equal. And I think as Christians that we would see that as being a true statement, that biblically we are created equal, and that when we're born there is no one who has more intrinsic value. We all have the same value in the fact that we are created in God's image. And so but people who would be on the DEI train, even Christians, even pastors who, we have pastors, or even in our own city, who would move in this direction or would believe this, but instead of seeing it that way, DEI focuses on equality of outcome. So, which is different. Meaning,
can you explain that?
Yeah, meaning that everybody deserves to have a similar outcome. So if you're black, you deserve to have a similar outcome as someone who's white. If you're if you're homosexual, you deserve to have a similar outcome, like in your life, like who you are and what you are able to accomplish. You should be able to have that, a similar outcome, and therefore they game the system. Those who are for DEI game the system so that they can help people get to be able to have that similar outcome. I mean, and so as an example, I'm just listening to a book right now. It's a secular book that is pretty interesting, and he talks about that, like in Harvard, they actually for a long time, for many decades, they basically had the premise of the best people come to our school. That's what we want. We want the best of the best. Well, it ended up that they were getting all Jewish students, and they were becoming known as a Jewish university, or they were in danger of becoming known as a Jewish university, which would have been devastating in their minds, because they didn't want that label. Matter of fact, Columbia actually ended up with that label. I didn't know that, but they ended up with that label. I don't know where they are now, but his whole point is that if he said the reason why that colleges began to change those standards, and Harvard was his example, was so that they could get other ethnicities into the university, and the idea was it's to help those ethnicities that needed more help. And so, but I think and I don't know, like it's one of those things where, to me, I don't want to say one way or the other in terms of what I believe. I mean, I don't believe that we should be hurting people and helping others. I don't think that's the case. But it is a complicated issue. It is a complicated issue, but I want to go back to the Declaration of Independence and the words Thomas Jefferson wrote, that in reality what he meant is that we all have the same DNA. I mean, we're all made in God's image, but that doesn't guarantee the equality of outcome. That all men are created equal, meaning they have the ability to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. I mean, everybody has that right to live before their Creator and pursue those things that they want to and desire to pursue, as long as they're not hurting other men. I mean, that's kind of the idea. But where DEI people go is that, no, we need to go beyond that to ensure that everybody has the same outcome, no matter what their quote unquote starting point is. Everybody has the same outcome, and it's a tough issue because I mean it is interesting that if you actually set up, as an example, a university where the best of the best come, like the most qualified come, you would have an inordinate amount of certain ethnicities. And I mean, nobody wants to say that, but you would have, for a variety of reasons, you would have a lot of Jewish students, and you would have a lot of Asian students. Mm-hmm. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but that's really the issue of what people are trying to accomplish. But they've taken it to a point of, now it's like we have to guarantee that black students are going to be successful at Harvard. We have to guarantee that lesbian women have the ability to get into the same, have the opportunity to get into the same positions as white males. And so then they begin to favor those people, so because they want that diversity. And they say it is in the name of equity, and they say it's in the name of inclusion, but in reality, what they're doing is they're disincluding others in the process. And what ends up happening is that you end up in a position like the fire department in Los Angeles, where you've hired people who actually aren't qualified. Like they're not qualified to do what they're doing. I mean, and that's not a shot at the mayor or the fire chief, and I think there's one other main position there that's been filled. In terms of it's obviously a DEI hire in all three of those positions, and I think the mayor's elected, but they went for that candidate because they wanted to see that type of person in that position. And so it's a DEI it's a DEI mentality instead of let's get the most qualified mayor. Let's get the most qualified fire chief. Let's get the most qualified, really any leadership position. And again, there's a quandary because white males have dominated most of those positions in the history of our country. And so it's a quandary. The pendulum swinging the other direction so that they don't have any opportunity is problematic as well. Now, it's interesting because there have been guys that, like Ben Carson and Tim Scott from South Carolina, black men who have risen to levels of influence and power who are black and who say, look, I want the same. I don't want any opportunity that's because of my color. I want to be the guy that works my way, up. And so they've proven that there is opportunity, outside of DEI. You don't have to, you can, if you truly want the best person for the job, the most qualified person for the job, those people can put themselves in a position to get those jobs. And you would hope they would. I mean, that would be the desire.
How did we get to a point where we went from the best person available to the job to we have to just pick someone that diversity?
Well, that's what I'm saying is that the background.
When did that happen, though?
Wow. I mean, I think it came along with the civil rights movement of 1964, right?
It started way back then.
Yeah, and I think that's I don't think it really took root until it seems like the 90s, maybe. Yeah, I don't know that for sure, but it's definitely been something that's been for the past 20 years. It's something that's been happening because it basically has taken a generation to really see this come to fruition. If you take a generation to be kind of a 20 to 25 year turnover, yeah, it's taken this long for us. So we've had to at least have this for a couple of decades in full force.
Yeah, it seems like it's picked up a lot of steam in the last 4 years.
Well, the reason it's picked up a lot of steam is because it's not that what happened prior to that coming to fruition. Like these people are now rising to a point of they're being put in positions of power, and so we're seeing that be affected. The activity that happened 2 or 3 decades ago is now resulted in where we are today, which makes it seem like it's accelerating, but in reality, it's been in the same trajectory all along.
So I want to kind of zero in on the fires there, but before we do that, I just want to ask you biblically, as we look at Scripture, is DEI biblical, and should we be looking at people as, oh, this is a black man and this is a lesbian woman, or should we just be looking at there's a guy and there's a woman? There's
a potential fire chief, there's a potential mayor, there's a potential president.
Do we look at their color or what their sexual preference is?
No. I mean, I obviously the Bible has a lot to say about ethnicity. I mean, nations is how the Bible puts it. Ethnos is Gentiles. But literally the nations. And you have all the nations of the world, and I think that's probably a better, more biblical way of dealing with it instead of race. I mean, ultimately, we're all of one race. We're the human race, and that's not just a trite saying. I literally believe that we have a common ancestor in Noah and in Adam ultimately, and therefore we're all the same. We have differences. We've talked about, I think, this on Fresh Bread a lot, or some. We have differences that color of skin, shape of our noses, and we have color of our hair and the shape of our face. I mean, all those things that are differences, but in reality, we're all human and we're all made in the image of God.
Should we be looking at that? Because does God have a design for leadership? Like, is it the best person available, or should we be? Because when I look at, let's just look at the Bible. You look at Moses and the men that he selected. Right, they were all men. You look at Christ and the disciples were all men.
Well, I think that I think that God's model would be to look at character first and ability second. So it's not a matter, and I'm borrowing that from even the qualifications of an elder. Like as an elder, you have to have a certain character. Like you have to have, like your character. You need to have this, integrity as a man to be an elder. And so not just anybody can be an elder, because it would be dangerous and it would be destructive to the church. And so there's qualifications of, character qualifications for being an elder, but there's also the ability, like being able to teach. That's an ability that they need to have. And so for the elder, it has to do 100% with character and ability. And I think that's the model that really should be throughout society. It has everything to do about a man or a woman's character and their ability to do the job,
So should a church ever do DEI as far as elders? Like, should they?
Absolutely not.
Is that even possible, right, to be biblical?
Well, I think we do. I think that diversity is good. Like, I don't have a
church body, but for elders, you don't want to have so many women.
No. But you would want the elder team to reflect the makeup of the body. I mean, so if you have, I don't mean what I don't mean. Let me make sure what I don't mean is
explain this.
Is forcing it. We need to choose Tim instead of Luke because Tim is Hispanic, and Luke is black, and we need to make sure that we have Hispanic representation on the elder team. No, that's not what we need to do. No. We need to be looking at character and ability. I mean, that's the qualifications. Well, actually, it's desire, it's character, and it's ability. That's the qualifications of being an elder, and it has nothing to do with being one color or being from one place or the other. It has everything to do with those qualifications. Having said that, you would hope that the diversity of the church body would be reflected in the elder team. Like, I mean, you would hope that in a quote unquote perfect world, you would have a similar representation based on who, the diversity of the church. But to force that would be unbiblical.
Yeah. And as you look at the world, and we have I think what we're trying to say, there's nothing wrong with trying to have that, right? When you look at schools, you have teachers. You would like so many women, so many men. You would like Hispanic teachers and black teachers and Asian teachers. I mean, it would be nice to have all of that together, so you get a good flavor of
yes, in a perfect world,
what our country is like. But yes. And when you look at jobs like FBI and police and firefighters, Secret Service, even the military, you would want a standard.
Yes.
There, and to say that, okay, because we don't have a lot of diversity, we're going to lower that standard way down to a point where now, if there is an emergency, we can't help you. We saw that with Donald Trump when he was, the assassination attempt. We had Secret Service agents. And I'm not saying these women were bad. They were right there. They were brave. They ran up there, but they were short and they didn't cover him. There should be a height. There should be about 6'5". Mm-hmm. If your presidential candidate is 6'3", just so you can. But what I'm trying to say is, getting back to moving back to the California fires, we had 3 women in charge of usually what males would be in charge of. The mayor, sure. The chief, the fire chief, and then there's a assistant fire chief. They're all women, lesbian. There's 2 of the lesbian of the 3, because they wanted to promote someone like that. What we're not saying also is that these women are directly responsible for the fire, because who knows who started it. I know there's some rumors that how it got started.
Well, I definitely want to talk about that.
And we will.
But that kind of comes under the category, and you'll understand why I say that, because that comes under the category of the wrath of God, and how do we view the wrath of God. Are
you going to get into the Golden Globe Awards?
Yeah.
I want to pick your brain on what we just, like I just mentioned, the military, FBI, police, firefighters, Secret Service. Mm-hmm. DEI is I think that almost is more dangerous than not doing that. Don't you agree?
Oh, well, for sure, because you have to try to, you need to try to hire the most qualified, in terms of the job. And I would argue that includes character, but it also includes ability. And especially in those positions that you're talking about, there needs to be an ability for leadership, and, especially leadership under fire, quite literally in this case. But yeah, whether they, can a female do those things? Well, yeah, I think so, because, you do have females in the Bible that are, have leadership qualities, and are able to, hold their own in different various situations. But generally speaking, men are going to be turned more that way. Men are more logical thinking. Women tend to, and this is generalities, women tend to be more feelings oriented. And, and those things, in terms of a fire chief, going by your feelings versus going by what, logic tells you, the advantage is going to be on the logic side. The advantage is going to be in terms of that particular role. And so there are roles that men tend to do better in, because of how they're built. And, that's not to speak down to women, because there's women there at all, because there are roles that women tend to do better in. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned school teachers, like especially for young kids. That my daughter's a kindergarten teacher, and I think she does a great job, and she's built for that. And I would never attempt to teach at kindergarten, even for an hour, because I'm not built for it, and just not who I am. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that yes, for sure, they need to have that people need to think in terms of who's the best for the job, who's built for it, and in general, and not be thinking about whether they're male or female, or whether they're black, white, Hispanic, Indian, whatever ethnicity they are. We shouldn't be thinking in those terms.
Yeah, we talk about doctors the same way. Like when you had your surgery, you just wanted the best guy.
I want the best doctor.
You don't want some DEI.
Well, and we certainly don't want a DEI hire. But I can tell you this: for a surgeon, if I'm going to go to a doctor every day, or periodically go to the doctor and actually sit down and talk to him, I want them to be a listener, and I want them to hear what I have to say, and I want them to work with me. But as a surgeon, I want them to have bedside manner, like my doctor. Yeah. But a surgeon, no, I want you to be able to do what you're going to do successfully, and you don't have to have bedside manner. So the best. I want the best surgeon I can get, and that best surgeon might not have other strengths except for being a surgeon. Like, they're really good at that, versus another person who has other strengths and that fit better in other roles. And that's okay. I mean, because that's true diversity. That's true, diversity of thought, diversity of who we are as people.
Did this kind of get ruined when they started giving trophies to kids? Back in the 80s?
Yeah, I mean, people make fun of that, and I definitely am not a participation trophy kind of guy. We've never been as a family that way. You need to earn it. But yeah, I think there's been a mentality that that we protect, that you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings and
stop keeping score.
Yeah, that we want you want to you don't want any negative reinforcement, but you want positive reinforcement. Like, you always want to look at the positive and never really deal with the negative. That's the whole idea of participation trophies. You actually didn't work hard enough to win, and that's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it's okay in the sense of that's what happens, and hopefully you take that loss and you build on it, and you say, you know what, I don't want to feel that feeling anymore, and so I'm going to work really, really hard to make sure I don't lose again. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that does play into it. I think the whole civil rights movement, personally, I think it's just sort of moved in that direction of, instead of give us equal opportunity, like instead of give us the opportunity to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, instead of that, it's become ensure us being able to have these opportunities, ensure that we get special treatment so that we can't fail. And I think it's just gone awry. And we see the result. We see the result in things like in stuff that's happening, such as the fires in L.A.
Has social justice kind of become a new word for socialism, communism? Like, is this DEI thing, is that... Because I've heard someone say this is what they do in communist countries, is they...
Well, I think that it's certainly soft communism. Soft, it's basically the idea is everybody's equal. Nobody rises above any other, which is completely opposite in a capitalistic society that, people have the opportunity to get rich if that's what they want to do. They have the opportunity to, own a house or own a boat or own a car, or, you have the opportunity and you can have really nice house and a really nice boat. And, there's obviously pitfalls, and we're going to talk about that in our sermon this coming Sunday. But on the other hand, in a more of a communistic mindset, we all have the same, drab apartment, and we all have the same.
One's equal.
Car that's terrible.
Yep.
They talked about, it's interesting because West Germany, after World War II, it split East and West, and West Germany produced BMWs, Mercedes, and I forget, maybe Audis. I can't remember which. There's like three main, like what we consider luxury car brands, and I forget what they had one car in East Germany, and it was just a terrible car, and there was like a 10-year wait list to get to even, or at least 10-year wait list to get on, get that car. Yeah. And I forget what the name of the car was, but
the infamous Trabant.
Yeah, that's the sort of stuff that that's the outcome that happens, with more of a communistic, socialistic mindset. And I think the DEI actually has, definitely has hallmarks of that.
It's almost as if this is like a fake world. It's almost like a utopian kind of world where everything's great, so you can just throw anybody in the job, that because we want to even everything out. So it doesn't matter if you have the skills to do it. We're just going to put you there. But then all of a sudden, when something happens, that person is like a deer in the headlights. They are like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
The mayor of L.A., when they did, I don't know if you saw the interview of her in the airport when she landed in L.A., and the guy was asking her, Mayor, what do you think? Do you have anything to say to the people? And she just stood there for 2 minutes, didn't say a word. It was like she was like a deer in the headlights.
Wow.
It's the most uncomfortable thing to watch, but you're just like,
I didn't see it, but
I feel sorry for her, because I'm like, you have no business being a mayor at this kind of crisis.
Yeah.
Because you have no idea what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You're great at, defunding this and putting money into a gay choir and all this other stuff, but you need somebody that's going to say, I'm going to get this done. We're going to fix this.
Yes.
I think Donald Trump would say someone's going to be fired. And,
Well, it's interesting because, if you were talking about like crises and you have Churchill who, that he actually was almost a failed man prior to World War II, but then ended up being the man of the hour, and a lot of people believe that he saved Britain. He saved them from, Nazi Germany, and his actions prior to the United States coming in, because of his personality and who he was, and that was what won the war ultimately, and ultimately was able to bring the United States in, and we won the war. But yeah, it's the reason it came to my mind is because we have to recognize that that there are people who are more qualified for certain things, and as a mayor, you would want sort of a blend of, being able to encourage people and civic activities and things like that. I'm not saying, like gay pride and all that. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying in general, right, encourage people to civic activities. But you also need someone who, when the city's in trouble, there's a problem, you want to have the person who has the fortitude to stand up and know the answers and say, this is the direction we need to go. Let's go do it. And everybody fall in behind that person, like Churchill. And so, then there's other examples in history. Abraham Lincoln is one in terms of the Civil War. But George Washington's another one that just had that ability to really show leadership in really difficult situations and lead in that way. And that's the last time. That's the last thing you need to do in one of those situations is have someone who is a DEI type hire. So.
Yeah, and if you look at like Karen Bass, who is the mayor, there's not one person that I've saw, even from Governor Newsom, no one is saying this is my fault. I blew it.
Yeah.
No one is saying that. They're all passing on to someone else.
Sure.
Or they're saying, hey, we couldn't have prepared for this. Whereas they knew a week before it happened that these winds were going to happen. This could happen.
Yes.
But nobody did anything anyway. So, okay, well, let's get into the judgment of God. We look at California, the land of fruit and nuts. Yeah, that's what they call it.
Fruits and nuts.
Fruits and nuts. Is this God's judgment on California? Can we even make that statement? Do we even know that? What do you think?
Well, I think if you're asking me whether or not, God sent the fires as judgment, similar to Sodom and Gomorrah, I don't think there's a way to answer that. I don't think that we can know that. It's hard for me to say, yeah. I mean, there was the whole, I'm probably jumping the gun, but the whole Golden Globes and
Right.
and the host of the Golden Globes who basically came out and said, that there was no mentions of God in.
I don't think Nikki Glasser, she meant it in a mean way. I think she was trying to be funny.
Yeah.
Because they mentioned their mom and dad, they mentioned their agents, but God, zero.
Yeah.
And I don't think she was trying to, but it came out kind of mockingly.
Yeah. And I don't know whether or not she was mocking or not, and in terms of what that was her intent. And I don't know her motives. And I can take it, look, I mean, it is true what she said. I mean, that there wasn't any mentions of God, and and she may not have even realized that there wouldn't be, but it really is an indication of how godless the society has become, and then even how godless for sure that the Hollywood, Los Angeles scene has become, and the fact that there's no mention of God there and that, and so. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't think it's knowable for us to know whether or not it was God's direct wrath, like on Sodom and Gomorrah or on Nineveh. If you read past the book of Jonah, obviously God relented, with Jonah's ministry to Nineveh. But then after that, we find out that he actually did judge them, 100 years later or something like that. And so, but those judgments were that, there seems, like fire from heaven. That type of judgment, right? This is we can't know for sure, but I'm not telling you it's not God's wrath, but I think it's God's wrath worked out in natural ways more than supernatural ways.
Is it God giving us kind of what, I mean, I shouldn't say us, but like humans and people living in California, they've chosen to go down this route where they have defunded the fire. And we even looked at with COVID, I guess, because they had a mandate for vaccinations. A lot of the firemen said no, half, and they all got fired.
Yeah.
So then they were short firemen, and then they ended up hiring, I don't know whoever they hired. But all these things sort of, not that are they unbiblical? Is that what we could call them? It's just the way.
Well, there's no, it's a lack of wisdom.
Yeah.
God built this world, with wisdom, and there's a wisdom in living in the world, right? And so there are things that work generally, and there are things that don't work generally. And so, I think that's the book of Proverbs. There's a general way to live your life in wisdom that's going to result in blessing. There's a general way to live your life without wisdom that's going to result in curses. And I think that when you start adding the things up that they're doing in California, and you're adding up, you're putting blocks and you're building a picture of what is going on there. You have to, one of those blocks has to be the DEI stuff that we discussed earlier. Another block has to be this lack of stewardship, and they would say that they are being stewards in terms of how they're stewarding things, but dumping, I don't know how much water into the Pacific Ocean because of some tiny fish that, I mean, I love nature. I mean, I love, God's creation, better way to put it. I love God's creation, but, there are some choices that we have to make in terms of stewardship to ensure that we are taming this world. And the choices that they're making in California is sort of a test. It's sort of a petri dish for the rest of the world in terms of how we're, especially the Western world. It's a petri dish of seeing what some of these outcomes are, right? I mean, so what we're seeing with these fires is the outcome of these things that like DEI and conservation that's not, that has the wrong focus, and the choices that they have made in those areas have led them to now be in a position where they're not able to fight these fires. Like it's it's led to them being, especially in the Pacific Palisades there near L.A., it's led them to be Sodom and Gomorrah because there's nothing left except ashes because of what's happened. And I don't think that, again, I don't see that as fire coming down from heaven. I see that as just stupidity in the decisions that they've made in terms of how they're going to do things. You mentioned budget cuts and not investing in fire protection, and there's also environmentalism where they won't allow people to cut trees and brush, and you have to. It's an act of Congress to be able to cut a tree in Los Angeles, and people need to be able to cut this stuff away from their property so the fire doesn't have the ability to take down the structures, but they haven't allowed that, and because of poor environmental policy. And so this is, when you add all that together, that's what happened with this fire. All those things together created a situation where they now are dealing with this fire that's out of control.
They're talking about, it was you're talking about the perfect storm. This was the perfect fire because you had winds of 100 miles an hour and all this stuff, this dead brush.
Yes.
I was going to ask
that hadn't been cleared.
Yes, exactly. So let's just touch on this. When we look at environmentalism, biblically, how do we look at, God has said where man is to take care of the planet. Mm-hmm. So do we risk the life of humans to save animals and plants?
No.
Or God doesn't.
No. But I think here's the thing is that I think that animals will flourish if we manage it correctly. And, if we manage that, let's not forget that in Genesis 1, he says that he speaks of filling the earth, but also subduing the earth. Yeah. And so part of subduing the earth is building and managing in such a way that the destructiveness of the earth is not going to be is not going to cause as many problems. And so, as an example, as an engineer, you would there's hurricanes in Florida, so you need to build for hurricanes. Mm-hmm. That's wise. You need to. Jesus said, "Build your house on the rock, not on the shifting sand." And so that's a wise thing to do. And because you don't want your house to fall. When the hurricane comes. When the wind comes. And so it's wise to cut the brush away from your home, so that if there is a fire, that it doesn't affect the home. That's just wisdom, right? And what we're doing in Los Angeles and in the rest of California, and it's infected the rest of this nation, is just really foolish policies that have led to the situation. And I think in that way, let me connect God's wrath to that. I think in that way God is showing His wrath, and it's just not supernatural in the sense of that He's sending down fire from heaven. It's natural in the sense He's just working through. This is what wisdom says. This is what you're doing, and so you're gonna reap what you sow.
Is the word foolishness is a good word, because are we living out Romans 1 right now?
Yeah, a lot of people would say that God's wrath can be seen in God withholding blessing, and I think that's that in withholding blessing we receive curses. And I think that's what we're living we're living in Romans 1, God removing His hand of blessing, and that's that we're receiving our just condemnation in terms of where we are. It's interesting because with the whole idea of climate change, and you asked about being a steward. So I think you asked, and I want to make sure I answer the question. As Christians, how should we think of subduing the earth, and how should we think of managing things? And so I'm not against conservation. I'm all for conservation, but it can't be at the expense of humanity. That we have to see that man, it's Jesus said, that man wasn't made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man. Well, I think the same concept. The world. The world is meant to serve man, right? The creation is meant to serve man, and we get it upside down, and we put the importance on the wrong thing. And if we see it in the right way, if we see it in a biblical way, that man is to subdue the earth and use the resources that he's been given. God is going to give abundant resources. And, we see it, unfortunately, we see it in terms of scarcity. But if you look at, the Garden of Eden, there was no scarcity. And so, the scarcity comes from man's sin, the fallenness of the creation. But that can be overcome and will, by the way, be overcome. And I think that's one of the reasons for the millennial kingdom is that Christ is going to come and reign, and he's going to show and he's going to model how to subdue the earth. He's going to do what Adam never could, and he's going to actually be, as the second Adam, he's going to be the guy or he's going to be the one who subdues the earth in the millennial kingdom. And it's going to be the same earth that we live on today. It's not going to be anything different. And by the way, sin is still going to be present in the millennial kingdom. And so, not that he's going to have sin, not that the glorified saints are going to have sin, but there will be still sin in the world, and he's going to show how to subdue the earth in that. So.
Yeah, and we have a responsibility. And I think one of the great examples of not being very responsible, I always think of the American buffalo.
Yeah.
They just massacred them all just to try to take out the Native Americans because they didn't have any more food or anything. And just the fact that they were trying to build railroads and things. But that's the extreme, right? But we also need to understand that if we need aqueducts for water, and there's a little fish or something that, maybe there's a way we can move the fish to another place or something. I don't know, to save the fish, but not mainly it's to have preparedness for disasters.
I mean, what you're saying is there's priority, and we need to recognize priority. Yeah. That, nobody is saying that little fish should be wiped out, but at the same time, there's a priority for water in the Los Angeles basin, right? And so there's priority for water in the San Joaquin Valley, so that it can grow the food. I mean, it's a incredibly fertile area, and that needs water to produce. And so, but the fish it might be important, but it's not as important as having an abundance of food, or not as important as having water in the LA basin in order to protect from fires and that sort of stuff. So it's a matter of priority. I mean, nobody. I don't think anybody is saying. I mean, I shouldn't say. There are people. I mean, Trump, I think, even said, it's all about a smelt. I mean, who cares? And and I want to be. I know we have people in our church that are minded in the way of conservation, and they don't want us to overuse our resources. They want us to use them well, and I get that, and I think that's right. But at the same time, it's a matter of priority, and you can't say, well, there's a smelt in this river, and we need to make sure there's a certain water flow in order to protect it. No, it's more important to take care of your crops and take care of your people.
Yeah, and I think Israel, it's too bad they couldn't have sent someone over to Israel, because Israel does a good job of having these water basins where they collect rainwater, and they have, they've refurbished the entire land.
Sure.
And I think California needed to do that.
Well, that's a great example, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because Israel back in the 40s and prior was just a big sand desert. Yep. And and then you have the Jews that have come back into the land, and now the land is flourishing, in terms of, but I think it'll go beyond that at some point, like when Christ returns and sits on the throne in Jerusalem. I think it's going to be an incredible place. And as I think the world is going to be an incredible place. But even now, even in their sinful rebellion, the Jews have been able to go back into the land and cause the land to flourish. And you look at California in the 1940s, and California was a paradise in the 1940s, right? Mm-hmm. You have Israel that was a desert, and now it's flipped. Yeah. And now California is the desert, and Israel is the place that's flourishing. And so I bring California, Israel are a great example of each other because they're very similar climates. They're very similar in terms of the lay of the land and the diversity there in terms of climate. They're very similar that way, and you see the difference between the two based on correct practices versus corrupt practices.
Yeah. Wow. Well, as we wrap this up, I remember we did a podcast, it was a couple ago, where we were talking about the upcoming year. And this year, 2025 has started out a little rough. We had a terrorist attack in New Orleans on New Year's Eve, and then now we have these horrible fires. And you did say, and I remember you saying this, that you were happy that, we were happy with the way the election turned out, but you're also uneasy.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, are you still uneasy about what's to come? Is Trump going to be able to be sworn in on the 20th?
Well,
or
I don't think I don't know. I mean, I hope so. I mean, probably, right? I mean, at this point, it seems like that those, the opposition has kind of stepped back, and I think, obviously, I think they're regrouping. I don't think they've gone away, but I think they're regrouping, and I think that at this point, it seems like Trump's going to be at the inauguration, be inaugurated, and start his agenda. But I don't think this is over. I think this is. I think the opposition is still there, and there's going to be something. I don't know. There are multiple somethings. There's already, like you pointed out, there's already been multiple somethings.
Yeah.
There have been, 2 separate terrorist attacks. There have been, one for sure in New Orleans. There have been other things that have happened, the fires. And so, yeah, I think we need to buckle up for 2025.
Yeah, we're just getting started. And I've heard a lot of people say that this could be the year of the terrorist.
Mm.
And let's pray it's not, but boy.
Yeah, we've been by and large protected that way.
Yeah.
Obviously you have the attacks of 9/11, but even with that, and as big as that was, in terms of terrorist attacks, it's been very limited on American soil.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we hope this was informative. We tackle a lot of things here, but we'll be praying for the people in California. We know that area. We pray that. I know at the time we're recording this podcast, there are more. I guess the wind's going to pick up again, and
yeah,
I don't know. We'll
and
see.
we both know people there, and there have been, going back to even God's wrath, there have been many Christians who have lost their homes in this, lost everything in this, in what's going on, and so it's not a matter of God judging the wicked and people escaping that are Christians. I mean, people are being affected, Christians and unbelievers, and so we just need to be praying for that whole situation and praying that there's repentance, and, where there needs to be repentance, and wise policies that are put into place as a result of this. And that my hope is that California would turn conservative. Like my hope is that there's people in the middle who would see that the liberal direction of California is going against them, and I'm hoping those people will flip and go more conservative, and you would see some conservative leadership pop up in California due to this, and due to what's happening. That's my prayer would be, because I think California, you take the temperature. If California gets cold, gets a cold, the whole country is affected, right?
Yeah.
Economically, but also in terms of our culture, and so. California, I've always thought California is 20 years ahead of the rest of the country. And so if you want to see what your state's going to be like 20 years from now, look at California. And I don't think that's as true as it used to be years ago, because of, it's media. Media drives that. And, the people see California and they drive the culture in that way. And I don't think they have quite the influence they used to. But I think they're still ahead of the culture, and that's the direction we're going if we continue down these roads.
We would pray it's a wake-up call.
That's my hope.
Yeah, me too. And we just want to make sure before we go that everyone recognizes the fact that we are not blaming the smelt. Right? We just we kind of picked on the smelt
and melt.
Have you ever smelt a smelt?
Heat. Have I ever smelt a smelt? No.
It's the worst smelt you'll ever smell. You've been listening to Fresh Bread, a podcast ministry of Grace Bible Church Gainesville. For more information, go to gracegainesville.org. And thanks for listening.